All right, welcome to our live Q&A today. This, like what we normally do at the beginning of the year, we're doing something a little bit different, and that I have a guest who I'm going to be doing more of an interview with instead of taking questions about the Bible itself. And that is because Brother Nibbe has been a missionary in Romania for many years. He was the man responsible for the project to translate the Fidela. And so he's got at least one field there he's very specialized in, but he's got several things that he specializes in that I would like to talk to him about. And so we're going to get into several questions that I have about the process of translating the Bible, and especially about the Fidela translation and the Cornilescu, the one that's been commonly used prior to the Fidela in Romania. But Brother Nimi has a great testimony of some places God's used him and things that he's done over the years, and he'll do a better job explaining and introducing all of that than I will. So, Brother, I'll let you introduce yourself and maybe give us a little bit about where God's used you and some of the things you've done over the years.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I became a missionary back in 1993, 92. I made an application. Then 93, I started with candidate school. Went 94, began deputation after I graduated from seminary. And then 95, I moved to Romania. So this November will be 28 years ago that I arrived here. We came here, started a church in the city of Cluj-Napoca. I originally came here to work with the union, but we separated after about 2.5 years. It was mutual. And we started Independent Baptist Church, and that went well. As any kind of church starting is a little rough, especially when you didn't know the language. And it was very interesting. And we actually started the church in our kitchen. We had about 18 months before we had anybody respond to us, but we had some people coming. And then it just took off and went up about 1997 and 98. We had our first baptism in 98. I had to go back on furlough for a whole year to raise more support. In the meantime, the church was a Romanian man, Benny Lario, that I worked with. He took over the church, and they're running in the mid-30s. Came back, we moved into a Seventh-day Adventist building. They weren't using it on Sundays, obviously, and so, but we got bigger than they did, so they wanted us to leave because people started calling it the Baptist church. And we had a couple days, 80, 90, 100 people. But then God moved us to another area of town. And it's kind of funny because a year before, I was standing out in front of this very building with Benny, and I said, "Why, look at this dumpy area. Aren't you glad God didn't call us into this horrible part of town?" It turns out that was the exact building we moved into. And we went from right about 25 people in June of 2000, and by April of 2001, we were averaging 180. And so these are almost all new converts. I had one family moved in that had come from another church. Other than that, they were all new converts. So we went from, I had 65 in my new converts class on Sunday morning. I only had 4 workers. It was me, Benny, his sister, and my wife, and that was it. We didn't have anybody else. So we started everything from scratch. I didn't know what I was doing. I literally learned on the fly. I was an accountant before I became a missionary. I never had one class in seminary on how to be a missionary. I didn't know anything about it until I became one. And one of the things we did is we started a Bible Institute, teaching the men in the church. And one of the men in the church, the man who actually prayed me into the country, looked at me and he said, "How come you keep saying, take a pen out and circle this word, cross it off, and write another word in there?" He goes, "Why do you keep saying that?" I said, "Because it's not right. It says the wrong translation." He goes, "Well, how come you don't make any changes in your Bible?" I said, "Because my Bible is right." I was preaching with the translator at the time because I wasn't fluent in Romanian yet. And he said, "Well, why can't we have the same thing in Romanian?" I said, "Nobody's done it." And they were using the Cornilescu on the Dumitru Cornilescu, the 1921, few different editions of it. basically is, if nobody knows what it is, it's a translation of a Louis Segond French, Swiss French Bible from Switzerland, the French language Bible from Switzerland, done in 1907, right around there. And that makes it a Jesuit Bible. It comes from the Vaticanus, the Catholic side, and so therefore it's got a lot of Catholic theology in it. And as I was preaching, it just got really frustrating to me because I couldn't preach from Psalms, I couldn't preach from Proverbs. There's so many things when I begin to do word studies with them that the same word was used over and over and over and over and over and over again for different words. Cornilescu is a very beautiful translation. It's poetry. It's a masterpiece of translation work when it comes to the Romanian language. It is not a masterpiece of translation when it comes to accuracy. And so the men of the church, they said, well, let's do a Bible translation. I laughed at them. I said, fine, go ahead and do a Bible translation. When you get somebody who knows what they're doing, then I'll go ahead and I'll be in. I said, I don't want anything to do with this. They says, you're trained, you're educated, you had Greek and Hebrew and all this other stuff. It's just, yeah, okay, fine. And I said, but I don't want to. They said, why? I said, because everybody will hate me. I said, I don't want everybody to hate me. And little did I know how accurate that statement was. And they said, well, the man, Alexandru, Alex, he said, well, I'm going to pray that God tells you to do the translation. I said, well, then he's going to have to assemble the team because we don't have translators here. And that's exactly what God did. Brought into the church a couple other men, one man who spoke 6 languages, another man who was just absolutely a man that led to the Lord. He was a doctor, a very educated man, and he wanted to get involved. He loved Romanian, knew Romanian very well. His wife is an expert in Romanian language. And we started a committee. We didn't really know what we were doing. We started in Matthew and said, well, okay, well, let's give it a shot. Let's see what we can do. And so we started translating. We started with Matthew. We didn't know what we were doing. And we started to, I thought people would be happy because as a missionary, I heard all the other American missionaries criticize, dump on, destroy, talk trash about the Cornilescu and, oh, they wish there was something better. So I said, well, let's do something better. And they said, well, you're not qualified. You don't know what you're doing. I said, well, okay. So I said, I'm not doing a translation for anybody else, but I said, for our church, we're going to. Well, in the meantime, our church is growing. We've become the fastest growing independent Baptist church on the continent of Europe, which was amazing to me. We went up to, we were averaging well over 170 people a week. And we had high days of 275 several times. And visitors coming out our ears. And it was amazing what was going on. God was moving mightily. We had people saved all the time. We were baptizing almost every week, constantly. Oftentimes 8 to 10 people a week we would baptize 2-3 times a month. And literally, I mean, I was spending time soul winning is what we were doing. There people, so many visitors had come to church that we'd go out soul winning on Thursdays. So we'd hand out invitations and then we talked to the people that came with so many visitors. It would be common to have 8 to 10 visitors on a Sunday in church. And so we were riding that wave and it was a lot of fun. And then it hit the beach in 2004 and rolled over on top of us. But in the meantime, around 2001, we started with the Bible translation. And all men from the church, people say, oh, you're an American. You didn't know Romanian. It's not your first language. You just learned it. You had no business translating. I had people call me on the telephone, really, really criticized. I lost almost every friend I had in the country. Missionaries turned their backs on us, said, hey, you're destroying the churches. You're making a mess. Stop it right now. And I said, well, listen, I'm not doing this translation for you. I said, I'm doing it because I can't preach from the Cornilescu anymore because I constantly have to tell people to fix things. This is not the Bible. This is not what it says. I said, it was our people that pushed me to it. Our church members are the ones who are doing the translation, and God has assembled a team. We had 24 people involved with the translation. All were Romanian, but all but three were Romanian. And I was the theologian. What that amounted to is that I was the one who did all the double checking to make sure that the theology was right, which meant I did an enormous amount of study. I put in myself 22,000 hours of study just by myself on that translation. We worked as a church 66,000 hours on that Bible translation. So you see, when we started with it, it was done because a man in the church said, why can't we have the same thing you have in English? And I said, because nobody's ever done it. They said, well, let's do it. And, everything involved with the amount of money that came in. I've spent probably close to $500,000 on this, but it's just come when we've needed it. It was very expensive to pay the men that were translating. I had 3 men I was paying for translating Romanians. And we had, so we translated 3 to 4 times a week for 4 hours at a time. And so you see, it was our church did this. This is a labor of the Gospel Light Baptist Church of Cluj-Napoca. This is not Brian Nibbe's translation. It's not translation of one person. This is a conglomeration. That's not a good word. It's a cooperative effort of men and women that God had brought together who are all experts in different areas. And so you see, that's just a general overview of how, we got the church, and then the people in the church, because they were new converts and were tired of me telling them to cross words out and write other things in the Bible. And so that's how we got into the translation. That's how the Fidela was born. The name of it, the naming it Fidela, that really, I did it kind of as a tweak in because we had so many people criticizing us that I said, fine, I'm going to name it Fidela just because. So initially, maybe my intention was that, hey, I want this to be, Fidela, which means faithful. Mm-hmm. And I wanted it to be faithful. I wanted it to be a faithful translation. And that was a good intention. But once people came out and were so critical of it, then there was a while there where I kind of poked him in the eye with it, which I probably shouldn't have done. So, but that's a long time ago. And that was like 20 years ago. But it was initially, the name Fidela was because we wanted it to be an accurate, faithful translation.
Okay. Yeah, that was actually going to be my first question on what led to it. So I'm glad we've already got into that, because it's actually set the foundation very good for the discussion. I probably should have given you a little bit of background from my side of things as well before we started, because that didn't need to be included in the video. But our church in Belgium is not a Romanian church. It's it's an international church. But because my wife is Romanian, she come out of Brother Jim Morgan's church. We do translate in. It's one of the languages we translate into. We've commonly in the past several years translated into Romanian and also French Lingala, and then also we're less and less now with Farsi, but it's very common to translate in Farsi for a while as well. But we have times where we're translating 3-4 different languages in any given service. So Romanian's always been the one we translate openly for the room to hear, just because my wife's the translator for that, and I feel like that's the one I would rather have done openly. Also, we have a lot of Romanians in the church, and so the Fidela is the translation we use for that. And it's something that I know some of the story. I know quite a bit about it. That's why a lot of times I was laughing or smiling when you say something, because I know about this. I know about it from Brother Morgan and other missionaries in Romania, even though you and I have not actually spoken in person till today. But it is an interesting to hear about it in a little more detail and actually get to know the story of how it come about. And so I guess I want to get a lot into that, because that's something I feel like there's still a great need for information for people, because I think even you would say that there's still a battle to get people to accept and appreciate the translation and what it is. I would assume you would agree with that, because I know I'm over here half a continent or on the other side of the continent having the same thing.
Well, yeah, there was a time when everybody wanted it. We printed over 150,000 copies, 180,000 copies, that actual printed ones. Now we still have I would say probably 25,000, 20,000 we still have in a container. So about 150,000 have gone out. We've also have almost every one of the apps, the Bible apps has got Fidela. And there's another almost 250,000 downloads. I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot. When I first checked, right after we went up with My Sword, they told me within a couple months it was one of the most downloaded foreign translations. And a lot of people downloaded it. They didn't download it because they loved it. They downloaded it because they wanted to write a book and tell me how horrible it was. And so what we did, I told the translator, said, listen, I said, the salvation here is going to be the text. I said, we've got to get it right. And, Cornilescu is a mixture of old Romanian, which is the Slavic base because of the Orthodox Church. So the religious words are, and Cornilescu was a priest or a monk, Orthodox, I think. And so his translation has got all of the Russian churchy words in it. And, we knew the language was Latinizing. Romanian is a Latin language, and we knew that people are moving away from the Russian influence and moving more towards the Latin. Well, our biggest mistake at the beginning is we pushed that envelope too far because we went with a totally Latin translation and absolutely dumped the Slavic and said the Romanian is not going this way. Let's go ahead and be the first to do it. But it was too much. It's too far. So we came out with our second edition. We had to roll back some of the Latin and put some of the more common words back in. But that has been some of the older people. We had a man come last fall, and he's an older gentleman, and highly, he had a nice haircut, let me put it that way. But other than that, he wasn't a very nice man, and uber critical of us in the church. We sat down on a Wednesday evening service and just nose in the air, and I taught. I didn't know who he was, and he started right up after we got done. He said, and he was waiting with a criticism about the language. He hated the word damnare. I think it's John 10:28 or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is now. And that's all he wanted to argue. He says, it's not Romanian. How would you use an English word? It's not an English word. It's a Romanian word. I said, it's correct. I said, condamnare is not right. Damnare is the correct word. And he said, you don't know anything. You're an American. He says, you're not Romanian. I said, no, listen. I said, that is the correct word. I said, and it's a Romanian word. It's not a Romanian word. And he's arguing. So I pulled up the decks online and we put it up because we had the screen in the church, and we put it up online right across the front of the auditorium, damnare. And I was explaining to a 70-year-old Romanian man the Romanian language. Now, people say, oh, that's cocky. That's on my part. That's very arrogant. And I wasn't trying to be, but the fact was he was wrong. And so what we did back in, one thing I did that I didn't want to do was I listened to the critics. There were websites against it. When I say that I lost every friend in the country, I'm not kidding about that. Missionaries wouldn't talk to me anymore. And unbelievable what happened, but that's a different story. But one of the things we did is the Romanians that were not against it, but didn't like the Fidela because they didn't like the language. I listened to him. I said, okay, fine. I said, listen, there's one guy, he's a pastor and highly educated, very smart. I said, listen, I paid him. I said, you come here to Cluj. I said, I'll pay everything. And we sat down for a month and we went verse by verse. I spent a lot of money on this. And I gave him carte blanche. I said, listen, I said, what needs to be changed? What doesn't sound right? What doesn't sound right? I went through it with him verse by verse. He thought the Old Testament was fine. He had a problem with the New Testament because he said that I made too many assumptions in Greek, and which is fine. And so he went through it, and I probably incorporated over 95% of his suggestions because they were all language oriented things, whether phraseology. And almost everything I took, literally almost everything. A few things I just said, no, I'm sorry to change the doctrine. Can't do that. And got all done. It didn't change his mind. He still is an enemy. He didn't like it, but he was a great help. Okay.
Mhm.
And so the thing is that the language, we had it checked. I went to the Babeș Bolyai, which is the big university here, and we went to a man who teaches Romanian grammar in the he's got a PhD in Romanian literature and grammar, and we gave him the Fidela, and I said, tear it apart. Tell me what is wrong with this thing. He gave it. He said to me, he said, that is without question the best translation I've ever read in Romanian language. Now, this is a man from Romania, a professor at the university, who told me that. Then there was another, we got a lot of phone calls from people, a man and his wife who lived between Cluj and Oradea. His wife was a language teacher at one of the universities or colleges in Oradea, and her husband was a high school teacher of Romanian. And they got the Fidela for the express purpose of, over the summertime, they were going to write a book and they were going to bury it. They wrote us back. And they called and they says, listen, this is what we were going to do. And I thought, oh, here it comes. Here's the book. Now what am I going to do? They said, we both use the Fidela now because you're right. That's what they, now understand. I'm giving you examples that are beneficial to my side. Okay. We heard from an awful lot of people who told me to leave the country. They told me I was an embarrassment. They were told, they says, hate it. Because the reason is because Cornilescu is absolutely 100% written in their hearts. But anytime any single person has sat down and looked at the actual language of what we have and the accuracy of what we're saying, we've had people that says, that sounds a little funny, but that's exactly the way you have to say it. I said, that was the point. There were some times when we just didn't know what to do. Do we go ahead and we make what you call a like you take the King James. The King James is a combination of formal and of dynamic equivalency. It's not all formal because you would have the NASB crazy translation. That's wooden. So there's a combination of dynamic equivalence and formal equivalence, but it's mostly what you call a formal equivalent translation. And so we try to do the same kind of thing with the Fidela. There were times where it's just we just can't say it any other way. And the reason why is because of the words, how we were trying to keep the word orders and all the way through to have a certain the words to be, you be able to do a word study. And that's another thing you can't do with Cornilescu because he just, anyways, I honestly,
right, I know.
I don't have a fight with Cornilescu. People use the Cornilescu. I don't, I'm not going to argue with him over it. And I'll sit down and talk to him. Anybody who's ever come and talked to me, with the exception of that old gentleman that came to church, has gone away going, oh, I never thought of that before. And they thought that I was the translator. And that was one reason why they were, oh, you're an American. A pastor from a small town or city in Romania called me, and he just absolutely unloaded on me and told me how I was ruining the Christianity and the church and everything. I was introducing strife. I said, listen, I'm not doing anything like that. And so you see, we didn't really start out. I could have written a book and put on all the differences between Cornilescu, and I could have I could have very much caused a lot of discussion on the issue, and I could have taken apart the theology of Cornilescu based on the problem is Cornilescu is a Catholic translation, okay, and it's a lot more following the Nestle Allen text or following the Vaticanus or the Jesuits. So you see, if you're trying to discuss Cornilescu with something like the King James, where the King James line, you can't do it because they're different texts. And so what are you gonna where's your ground zero? Because there are only two places the Bible comes from. It either comes from Syria or it comes from Egypt. There are only two places. That's where the translations flow from. There's not line after line after line after line. There's only two.
Yeah.
And Cornilescu comes from the Catholic side. And so therefore, there's really, where do you start the discussion at? And that's the whole point. And that was, I've got a lot of study in the origins of the Bible and the line where it came through. And I know what I believe, and I can talk for a long time on it. But there are only two, and you have got the Syrian through Antioch, basically through Constantinople, which turned out to be the Orthodox, and you got the Catholic side, and there the twain shall meet on a lot of the text. And so that's one reason why I haven't gotten into arguments and fights with people who like the Cornilescu, because we don't have a common starting point.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, and that's actually, to be honest, something I'll probably get to a little bit later in discussion, because actually you've hit around several of the questions I want to ask, but one of the ones I do want to bring in, because it's kind of where we're at, is what is the most difficult part of choosing the right word? I was thinking of, for example, this is a silly maybe example, but like in English, we say I have a needle, but I know in Romanian it's ear of a needle. There's little things like that sometimes are silly, but
well, but see, that's the thing, that's a culture thing, because the word in Greek is just the opening and the end of a needle. It's not the eye of a needle, it's not the ear of a needle. It's just the way it is in the culture. And you have a lot of cultural differences and a lot of cultural, I've got, when I moved to Israel in 2017, one of the things I studied is Hebrew, both, I had already had ancient Hebrew, which is called biblical Hebrew, and then modern Hebrew for spoken. I got about 2,000 classroom hours of study time in Hebrew. And there's if I had my way, everybody would speak Hebrew, because anyways, that's another discussion. But what I found out is the way that people understand what they're reading comes a lot from the culture and comes from their language, and a very big issue. So it's very important to the Romanians. Very important that something sounds Romanian to them. It's incredibly important. They don't want to read in English, anglicized Romanian translation. They don't want that. However, the thing is they were really critical of me, but yet the fact is Cornilescu is not. He basically cannibalized the Louis Segond, the French one. And so, but Romania is a francophone country, and so they're sister languages. So there's a big difference there. They told me that I had one man say, he said, God dropped the Cornilescu to us out of heaven. I'm thinking, no, sir, he didn't do that, because he doesn't have a different language, a different Bible for every country. And there's one word of God. And so that was the one thing we struggled with a lot. How do you choose the right word? Well, what we did is we had to determine where we thought the right words were. Okay. Now we use so many resources, Oh my goodness. We had, when we would do a translation, we have, okay, let me see. When we did let me just give you an example. John, when we were doing the translation of John, in Romanian, we used the Cornilescu to see what they said. We had 5 Romanian translations that we looked at. Also, we were looking at the Trinitarian Bible Society Textus Receptus to see what they had to say. But it came down to the fact is you have all these different possibilities. You have to be very careful if you don't know Greek, if you don't know Hebrew, and you're looking at where the ancient languages are there. You have to be very careful that you're not reading somebody who, like Thayer, you'd be very careful, because they're going to give you definitions of words that aren't necessarily right. And so what we did, and this is where the biggest criticism came, and people thought they were slamming me, and I thanked them. They said, this is the King James in Romanian. And I said, wow, You have no idea how much I love to hear that, because what we did is, while we didn't translate from the King James, we used it as our lexicon. Okay. You got to have a lexicon. You have to know what the correct understanding of the words are. And so when we would translate, we back translated to the King James. And what we did is we looked and said, how did they use this word? And so we eliminated all of these other resources, okay, and said, listen, we're not going to sit here and decide, was this guy right? Is that guy right? Is this guy right? Is that right? We want to know what the correct understanding of the word was. And our position was that the King James has got the correct understanding of the word. And so therefore, we use the King James not as a translation text. We use the King James as our lexicon. And now there's a very big difference in that. And but when we were all done, what we did is, the very last thing we did is we read them side by side. And we said, now, do we sound like the King James? Do we agree with the King James? And because that was our check text, that was our check Bible verse. There's got to be something in our mind. We're in 2020, 2001, 2010, 2011 at the time. By the time we got to that point, I said, there's got to, we either believe that the Bible exists, or we don't believe the Bible exists. And if we do, then what do we believe? For English, okay, we say it's King James. I said, well, fine, we all speak English. This is what we're going to go with. We're not going to pull out the Hebrew. We're not going to go and get the QnA in Greek, and we're not going to go get the Masoretic in Hebrew, and we're not going to look at this version and that version and all these other ones. We said, this is the one that's out here right now. And so we took the words of the King James, and we developed our lexicon for Romanian based on that. Now, did that affect the way some of the wording was done in Romanian? We hoped not. That's why we didn't do a translation from the King James into Romanian, is because we didn't want to have an anglicized version. But in the final result of it was, we wanted to say the same thing, but we wanted it to be Romanian. There are some places, I think Corinthians, I mean, sometimes we would meet for 4 hours and we get 3 verses done. And the reason why is Paul would talk for a whole paragraph, or he talk for a whole chapter, and then he would make his statement in the verse that was the whole theme of the chapter, or the 2 or 3 chapters. And sometimes we'd have to go back. I'm sorry, I keep hitting this thing. Go back and retranslate again, because, oh, wait a minute now. And the hardest thing we had to do, what we had to keep doing, is changing words. Somebody asked me sometime what it was like. How many translations did we do? We did 7 translations of the Fidela. Okay, the first one we threw in the garbage. Absolutely said, not doing it. We started over with a white piece of paper. So it was kind of economies of scale. It was the first try. We spent 2 years on the New Testament and threw it away. Started over again from zero. Okay, but by this time we knew what we were doing a lot better. By the time we got going with it, then we were developing a lexicon. We were developing page after page after page after page after page. What I did is I would take the Greek word, and I would say, okay, this is the way that is translated. Here's the understanding. This is the way the King James translated from it. These are the possible words we have in Romanian. Okay, now the question is which one of these words? And is there every verse in the Bible where this is found, where this Greek word is found? Here's how it's all translated by the King James. Here are possibilities in Romanian, and now we had to match them up. Okay, so we had a lot of Rubik's Cube kind of thing. So what we would do is have you ever put a Rubik's Cube together? Okay, I'm no good at it. I got a son who can do 7 by 7. He's just a genius with these things. But with me, I get one side done. But what happens if you don't know what you're doing? You'll get 1 or 2 lines done. But the problem is in order to get the third one done, you have to mess the other 2 up again. So that's really what we did. Is we had our first 2 we had our first 5 translations actually, and we said, okay, we're in good shape. When we got down to the very end and we realized that we wanted people to be able to do word studies, and we wanted people to be able to follow the words through, and we wanted to be accurate, and we didn't want to have a dynamic understanding of this. Wait a minute now, but this is what it says, and this is what it means. And we had to be careful of false friends. We had to be careful because some words, like take the word justification, it's not the same in Romanian. You can't use justification. You have to use something else. So we used we decided to explain the word. And so you get down to the very last one, but you have to mess up what you did beforehand. And when you do that, now you have to be very careful that you get everything. So the final translation process, the final time we went through it, number 7, took us probably close to 5 years. And people kept saying, well, you keep coming out with new editions. You keep with new translations. No, we don't keep coming out with new translations. What we were doing was we were realizing that when we went through the last one, we missed a few verses. Oh, this one, we forgot that word. We forgot this word. We forgot that because we had our standard. And there's a lot of words in the Bible, okay? And humanly speaking, there were only 4 of us that were doing it. We had 24 involved, but there were 4 of us doing it. The last time we went through, we thought we got everything, but then we printed and we realized, oh, wait a minute now. And people would begin these flood. What about this? How come this is wrong? This is wrong. That is wrong. It wasn't wrong. It was just that we flat out forgot to make the change. And that's why when we made the changes, people say, well, see, you didn't know what you were doing. Well, yeah, we did know what we were doing. It's just we missed it. Okay, I'm sorry. That was the problem. And we didn't have 55 or 60, translators sitting around with teams of people helping them. We were 4 of us. And but it was, so that's the hardest thing is how do you choose the right word? Because there's so many things you have to be involved. You have to wonder about. False friends is the biggest one. We were called to England, we were brought to England by Traducerea Bible Society. They said, hey, let's work together. Maybe we can work together. But they were translating, supposedly, I put that in quotation marks, supposedly doing their translation. But what they wanted to do is they didn't want a translation from zero like ours. Ours was a brand new translation. They wanted to revise the translation, and they were revising the Yosh Bible. And but I pointed out to them, I said, listen, that's not the Yosh Bible. This guy, I won't mention the gentleman's name who was doing the translation, is all he was doing was taking Cornilescu. And we had one of the text verses, that Czech text, that was the reason why I just basically threw my hands up way back in 2001 as I can't preach from this anymore, was Romans 10:9-10. And what he did is he just copied it straight from the Cornilescu. And I said, listen, that's not what it says. And we had a big discussion, and that's the president of the Trinitarian Bible Society said, pull it off the press. He said, stop it right now. And they stopped the Bible translation because they realized that the Romanian translator they were using, he and his wife, were basically just they were taking Cornilescu and passing it off as their own translation. And it was they were bringing all the errors with it. And so we struggled with what word to use, but it came down to it when we made the decision of how to know what lexicon was right. We said, well, let's just use the King James of the lexicon, and that solved our problem.
That's the real reason why I asked the question, because I actually have had somebody explain to me a little bit of the process before of how you picked words. And I know for any translator, that's really the actual hardest thing many times. And while I'm not somebody who's very good with Greek or Hebrew, I do know that most anytime you try to go to a Greek or Hebrew word, there's so many different possible definitions.
Yeah.
And so that's knowing a little bit of your process. That's why I wanted you to explain it for people, because I think it'll benefit them to know that. So, well, you've also already kind of answered this question, but I still want to bring it to give you a chance to maybe hit on it some more. And that is, since we are talking about the Cornilescu, there are other Romanian translations, and maybe I should bring some of them into discussion, but this is the 2 main ones that I ever find myself dealing with. But what are some things that you specifically set out to correct? I mean, we've talked about the Catholic influence on it, but some specific things you want to correct in the Cornilescu.
Well, I wanted to, okay. The Cornilescu is used in the Baptist Union, the Pentecostal Union churches. It's used in Adventist churches. It's the standard received Bible translation in Romania for what they call the Protestant, Neo-Protestant churches. And you look at them, though, they all have one basic doctrine in common, and they're Arminian. Anybody who claims that the Baptist Union is not Arminian or the Pentecostal Union is not Arminian doesn't know Romanian churches. And I was referred to as the Great Western Heretic in the Baptist Union Church I preached in Cluj, because I preached in eternal security. And I was called the Great Western Heretic. I was one of the reasons that they separated from me was over that issue. And well, like I said, it was mutual. We don't fight about it. I'm not enemies with them. I'm friends with a lot of the pastors there. I mean, I don't fight with them, but when it came down to the union, there's just no way in the world we could work together over that. And I think the reason for their Arminianism is because the Bible translation, the Cornilescu, you can show in the Cornilescu, if you believe that is the word of God, then you lose your salvation. And it came down to, and somebody explained to me, is Romans 10, 9, and 10. And it's just flat out wrong in the Cornilescu, and it comes from, in fact, here, let me just now, I hope I didn't give you the wrong reference. Let me see here. I have, get off of a second here. Okay, let me get off of the Hebrew New Testament just a second here. Okay, yeah.
Fidela right here in front of me, but I can't get to. I don't have Cornilescu to help you with that one.
No, okay. For instance, here I have it right here in front of me. Cornilescu, RCcb. Okay, dacă mărturisești cu gură ta pe Iisus ca Domn și dacă crezi în inima ta că Dumnezeu l-a înviat din morți, vei fi mântuit. So the translation of that is, if you will testify or confess, therefore, with your mouth, or testify Jesus with your mouth as Lord, and if you will believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Okay, that's there's a myriad of problems with that translation right there. Fidela says, că dacă vei mărturisi cu gură ta pe Domnul Iisus și vei crede în inima ta că Dumnezeu l-a înviat dintre morți, vei fi salvat. Okay. Anybody who understands Romanian, if they were paying attention, sees the difference there. You go to, so let me go back to Cornilescu right here again. So if you will confess, therefore, with your mouth, Jesus as Lord. Okay, now that is not a translation. That's a paraphrase. Problem is almost every Bible follows that paraphrase. The new darling of the English, the ESV, follows that, I believe. Well, I don't use the ESV. Maybe I'm wrong, but you take a lot of the other ones, they do. But now, just take the King James now. Okay, Romanian says, if you will confess Jesus as Lord. Okay, and if you will believe in your heart. So they added a couple of words and they combined it. And what they did is they changed the name Lord Jesus and from a name into a noun or a position. So if you look at the King James here, that if thou shalt confess with your mouth, thy mouth, the Lord Jesus. Okay, now, and believe in your heart that God is raised from the dead, thou shall be saved. So the problem I had with that was this is the first verse that caught my attention, because I asked a man, I said, listen, I said, when were you born again? He goes, when was I what? I said, when were you born again? He said, I don't understand that phrase. I said, John chapter number 3, except a man be born again, he shall not see the kingdom of God. And that was the other problem, was the reflexive mom nascut, to birth myself. And this is, I really do believe, a massive problem doctrinally. I've had Romanians say, well, you have to birth yourself. You got to, what are you talking about? That's the reflexive verb in Romanian, mănesc. I'm born, I birth myself. I said, but that's not what it says. Even if you go to the Greek, it's in the passive, which you must be born again. It must happen to you. You don't do it yourself. It happens to you. And that's salvation and the whole thing right there. And it comes down to a function of the language. And this is one of the ways they really criticize us, because they said, you have to be born again. And I didn't say, you must birth yourselves again. Now, they argued with me and they said, oh, this is baloney. But it comes down to a doctrinal issue. That's exactly what they believe in their Arminianism, that you got to do it, because you got to keep it with your works. But the way a man explained to me from Romans 10:9, he said, well, it's quite simple. It says very clearly here, if you no longer confess Jesus as Lord, you're just no longer his. I said, well, it doesn't say that. He says, yes, right here. If you confess Jesus as Lord, so therefore you're born again, you're saved. And he said, but when you no longer confess him, then you're no longer a child of God. I said, but wait a minute, it doesn't say confess him as Lord. He goes, it does too. I go, no, it doesn't say that. That's not what it says. And I whipped out, I said, he goes, oh, your King James is just making that up. I said, no, listen. I said, fine. I said, if you really want to argue, and I whipped out the Greek. It doesn't matter necessarily on anything. None of that's a paraphrase. It comes way back from, I think, Clement. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I'm talking off the side of my mouth on this one. I don't remember exactly who started writing that. But it is an explanation of the verse. They say, he says, this is what it means. We know this is not what it says, but this is what it means. Well, see, this is the problem I have, that Bible translations now are using what a man said who said, well, this is what it means. And now they've taken that as their Bible translation. Yeah. Cornilescu did that. And I said, well, we're not doing that, because you see, it came down to it. I couldn't teach the Bible. I couldn't teach salvation from the Cornilescu, because people kept throwing verses at me. He says, well, it says right here in Acts that if you're not baptized, you're not saved. You go to Ephesians chapter number 5. Okay. And there's another big problem, that the Bible talks about being washed with the water of the word. And the Cornilescu says the baptism. This is not baptism. That's not the word that's used. It's washed. I said, God, I said, they're teaching baptism and regeneration, and they're teaching you to lose your salvation based on about 4 or 5 bad verses. So when we first started, we said, well, let's just fix these verses. It doesn't work that way, because Cornilescu is not a translation that follows any sort of format underneath it. It is a hybrid translation, and Romanians are going to hate me for that, but the fact is that's exactly what it is. It's poetry. Yeah. Cornilescu is a master document of beautiful Romanian, and it speaks to the Romanians, because if you know, I mean, you're married to a Romanian, you understand that the language is very important to them. Okay, yeah. I'm fluent in Romanian. At least I like to think I am. People will argue with me, tell me I'm not, because of my accent. But so maybe fluency is the wrong word. I'm proficient. Okay, I preach in Romanian, I talk in Romanian, and I don't have any problem. I understand everything that's going on. But I got in a taxi in Cluj, and the man said, "Where are you going?" And I spoke to him. He spoke to me, and I spoke to him in Romanian. He turned around and looked at me. He goes, "Where did you learn to speak Romanian?" I said, "Well, I've been here since 1995." He says, "1995? How come you never learned how to speak correctly?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Your accent is wrong." I said, "My accent is wrong." I said, "What about what I said to you? Did you not understand?" He says, "It doesn't matter. Your accent is wrong. You don't speak Romanian." I said, "What are you, French?" I mean, come on. I don't get it. And it was kind of funny, because then he says, "Well, fine. He's not going to speak to you in English." And he spoke to me in the worst possible English. And I said, "When did you learn how to speak English?" "Oh, in high school." I said, "How come you never learned properly?" And he was, anyways, the point is that is the one thing. One of our translators quit. He said, "I can no longer translate with you." He said, "You don't speak Romanian." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You don't have the accent." I said, "I don't hear it." I have a problem with that. I don't hear it. I can't hear it. And my children can speak with Romanian, with the Romanian accent. Is the people, me, I on the telephone or I speak with perfect Romanian, grammatically speaking, and they'll switch to English and say, "You're not from around here, are you?" And so you see, this is because of this. This is why I wasn't listed as a translator, and I did not do the translation. I was the theologian. I chose a lot of the words. a lot of the words that they couldn't come up with because they had Cornilescu stuck in their head, or because they had the old Orthodox translation in their head. I did choose, and we worked really hard on a lot of things, but there's a lot of criticism came down because people thought that I was the translator. Well, I didn't matter how many times I told them I wasn't, it didn't matter. And so you see, the what I tried to fix initially was the doctrinal errors on about 10 verses. And once we got into it, we realized that you just not possible. You can't do it. And so, and the other thing is it would not have been ethically correct for me to go ahead and just change a few verses here and there and call it a different translation, when the fact is it is materially Cornilescu, and I have no right to change this translation. I don't have a right to do it. And that's why with us, though, we put an open copyright on the Fidela, which means it says right in the front, it says you can print this to your heart's desire, but you do not have the right to change it. And this was very clear on that. I just don't. I said, if don't change it, put your word in there. And so we tried to make it as easy. We tried to listen to the criticism that came across, and we did listen to a lot of it. And that's one thing that we took a lot of ammunition away from people when they came back and says, you did this. And wait a minute, look at this. It's there. Oh. And then a lot of our most harsh critics actually became friends of ours because they said, oh, well, you listened to us. I said, well, of course I listened to you. You were right. And well, we heard that you just hated everybody and that you just were throwing, flame throwing. And I said, no, we want this to be correct because it's not my translation. It's the translation of the Gospel Light Baptist Church is what it amounts to. And we did it for our church, but a lot of other people wanted to use it. So we were happy about that. And, so anyways, I've talked around in circles about a few things. I hope I answered your question.
No, you've answered it well. And it's actually some funny things there for me as well, because we have people from across Romania, different, all the way from one side to the other in our church.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest difficulties I have is that when I get into certain word studies or I focus in very specific on a word, is some of the disagreements they get because of accents and all this different stuff.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things I've run. Actually, one of the things that has helped me the best in showing people why we use the Fidela is because when we start getting into specific words from the King James Bible, because our ministry is in English, and so when we start getting in specific words, I think charity was one of the first ones I had that with, where somebody came to me after I'd done a study on that. And they said, you're right. The Cornilescu's wrong about this. I can't use the Cornilescu to teach what you just taught.
No, you can't. That was another one of the words that you mentioned. That I've forgotten about that, but we had a problem with that too.
Yeah, that's one of the words I've had it with. I had a few. I want to think even like we were talking about the reprobate mind. I want to think that was one of them also that I had something similar with, where some people coming from Cornilescu had some issues there.
Well, the thing is with Cornilescu again, the man was trying to put a translation into Romanian that the average person would understand. It was an everyman translation, and he did the best he could. And as far as Romanian language goes, it speaks to the people. They love it, and that's one reason why I've been so harshly attacked. That look, you're trying, nobody can't sing any songs from this, can't do this because this happens and that happens. I said, well, and a lot of that criticism was correct. I says, you understand, we want to be able to sing also with it, but the difference is we don't have tens of thousands of people with all their abilities writing songs with it. There's a lot of criticism that is correct. I don't disagree with that. Our main reason, the first thing we wanted was accuracy, and then after that we worked on readability. We didn't go the other direction. We didn't start with readability and then worry about accuracy later. Accuracy was our first point.
Yeah. And
that's one reason why we called it Fidela. Did we want it to sound nice? Absolutely. And anyways.
No, that actually brings me even to one of the bigger questions I wanted to get into, is because this is one of the things I find with Romanian people who still cling to the Cornilescu more so. is because there is a history behind it. You have a man who wanted to get the Bible into the hands of the people going into war. He
Mhm.
wanted to make sure they had it, that those people could have the gospel. And it's a beautiful history. It's something to be appreciated. It's
Mhm.
something, as you say, the literature of it, like as a work of literature, it's very impressive the way he's made it a poem and the way he's done it. All of that's true. But the thing I find is a lot of Romanians, their biggest struggle is that sentimental attachment that they have, either because of the history or because of a personal connection because they grew up with it or they got saved reading it. And so that was actually my next question is what would you say to those people to try to help them?
Again, we never intended on going nose to nose with the Cornilescu. We never intended on supplanting and replacing the Cornilescu. Um, one of our church members is a bus driver, and he tells me he has to work every other Sunday, and once every other Sunday, one Sunday in the morning, and then 2 weeks later he's in the afternoon, and so once a month he's on a morning route. And he told me, he said, I go through, and he says, we go through and pick up the students. And he said they get on the bus, they go to churches because we get a lot of university students here. He said, without exception, they've got Fidela in their hands. I said, what? He goes, no. He says all the young people are using Fidela that are in that not. This is his statement, okay, on his bus route, and these are foreigners, okay. These are not Romanians. These were most of the young people who wanted a Bible that was more in the language that they spoke. And the thing is with the Fidela, what we did is, yeah, we pushed the Latin side of it. We pushed Latin Romanian is what we did, and we did it on purpose. And we did write it for the younger generation. That is true. I was looking forward towards that. Now, the criticism and the opposition has been, vitriolic, has been very heavy. It's died down now. There's a lot of stages to it. The rejection is the first stage, and then the ambivalence is the next stage, and then people begin to use it, and then acceptance comes down the line. We're not at the acceptance stage yet, but the amount of Fidelas that are being asked for at the moment are not that many, but there still are a lot of people who are doing evangelism, people who are starting churches. They come and ask us, do you have any Bibles that you can give us? Because we want to use this for the young people like it. And so what do I say to somebody who uses the Cornilescu? I don't really, we didn't, the other missionaries, there's one missionary, he absolutely hated the Cornilescu. There's only one Bible translation he hates more than the Cornilescu, it's Fidela. And but he's got men in his church that loved it, and he banned it from his church. He's the missionary here, and he banned the Fidela from his church. You can't. And he calls it Brian's book. That's what he calls it. And he doesn't call it the Bible; he calls it Brian's book. And he's just really critical of it. So, what do I say to somebody who uses the King James in English but rejects the Fidela and uses the Cornilescu? I like, what's your problem? Does doctrine mean nothing to you? I've scratched my head on that one. What do I say to a Romanian who's used the Cornilescu his whole life, and he's in an area where the Fidela is used? I would say basically, you're going to have to put them next to each other, side by side. This is a process. We have people in our church that would bring the Cornilescu to church, even while I was preaching from the Fidela, even after we had printed everything. And they would read the Cornilescu, and when they would do that, I would make sure that I would point out, now listen, Cornilescu says this, that's wrong. And I would be, because it's my church, okay, and the official Bible in our church was, and I made no bones about it. I don't like the Cornilescu. I won't use it. I won't hand it out. I won't give it to anybody. I won't. I just don't do it. Are you the enemy of the Cornilescu? I'm not its friend. Let me put it that way. If somebody wants to use the Cornilescu, that's their problem. There are missionaries in Romania who use the Cornilescu. That's their problem. I'm not going to fight with you. Don't fight with me over the Fidela. That's your decision. You want to do that, that's fine. However, the Catholic mentality of some of the missionaries blows me away. I had one missionary tell me, he said, listen, he said, we don't need another translation because they have us to explain it to them. I said, just like the Catholic Church has, the Catholic people have the priest to explain the Bible. What is that? I don't understand that. And that's not even a Baptist position. Yeah. So you see, there's a lot of different messages that are out there, and the people have said to me, well, I want to know which one is right. And what I tell them is this. I said, listen, I said, Jesus kept asking people a lot. He said, have you not read? Okay. Now, my question for you is do you get your doctrine from the Cornilescu? I said, or do you get your doctrine from the church that is then backed up by the Bible? Which way does it go? I mean, if you go to a Jehovah's Witness, we study the Bible. No, you study Watchtower, and then they open the Bible and say, this is how it agrees to it. I said, the Bible's on the back end used as a supposed understanding of what they've already taught you instead of what they teach you coming based off the Bible. I said, so if you really want to know, you're going to have to make a decision on what's more important to you. Do you believe the accuracy of the Cornilescu is fine? Does it agree? Does it disagree with if you're in your church, they have the King James that they hear all the time. Does it agree with that? Again, we did the translation for our church. That was the original reason for it. And after we were criticized so badly, I pulled away from it. I got so tired of it. The amount, I had missionaries call me. One guy called me. He said, well, we got away from a conference. He said, and everybody talked about how much of a horrible person you were. And I wanted to find out for myself. I said, what? And so he began telling me what everybody said. And I said, well, listen, don't call me at 7:30 in the morning. I don't really want to know all of this kind of stuff. And so you see, these are the guys that I thought would like the Fidela. None of them did. Not a single one of them. None of them. Okay. Well, there's one. Excuse me. There's one. Now other missionaries are beginning to use it, but for a while there's not. And one reason why is because people said, hey, we've used the Cornilescu all the time. There's no reason to change. Again, I didn't do it to try and get people to switch from Cornilescu. I did it because I couldn't preach from the Cornilescu, and we did it for our church. And anybody else, we offered it to the people who wanted it. Now, we suffered a lot of reversals, and we had to develop some pretty thick skin pretty quickly. But the critics we had actually were very helpful to us because they made the Fidela better. My advice to them was read it. Just read it. That's all you want to do is just read it. And there's one area of the country where the Fidela is everywhere, and that's around Arad. I don't know why, but we've probably sent 40 to 50,000 Bibles to the Arad area. I don't know if they're burning them and making bonfires out of them, or I don't know what they're doing with them, but that's where the Bibles have gone. And I've gotten responses back. We had a Facebook notice that said at one point over 43,000 people were talking about Fidela in Romania. Okay, so people were discussing it, and the word Fidela was coming up in Facebook 43,000 times. It was coming up. So you see, I'm not trying to give a cop-out answer. The fact is we're not in competition with Cornilescu. Haven't tried to be in competition with Cornilescu, but if there's somebody who really is concerned about whether or not is accurate what they're reading, my simple advice for you is just get a Fidela and look at it and read it. Just read it and put them next to each other. We've had a lot of people who said, I put Cornilescu down. There's just too many problems. One guy told me the biggest issue is, he says, I want a Bible that talks about studying. Study to show yourself approved unto God. I said, really? And he goes, yeah, it's because, Cornilescu doesn't say that. He said, there's no Bible in Romanian that says that. I said, yeah, there is. And I showed him the Fidela, and he uses it now because of that one verse. Okay. So you see, I'm not out crusading. I'm not out I don't write books against Cornilescu. I don't. Because what we have is what we have. Anybody we witness to gets Fidela. All of our tracks are Fidela. All of everything we put online is Fidela. Everything, all evangelism is done with Fidela.
Right.
So,
Well, for sure, you and I both have a lot of friends in Romania who still use Cornilescu. It's not like it's an issue
no,
where we have to go fight with people.
no.
But for me, the argument I would give to somebody, because what I find is reason why I want to get into that question, and I appreciate the answer you've given, but the reason I wanted to get into it is because, like in my church, I still have people who have no idea. They never used the Fidel, never heard of it until they come to me. And so the conversation I actually had just last week with somebody was this, that they came to me talking about the Cornilescu and the beautiful history and the attachment and all behind it. And my answer to them was very simple. If I got saved in a church that was not doctrinally correct, and as I grew as a Christian, I realized it was not doctrinally correct, I would not stay in that church just because that's where I got saved at.
Right.
I would go somewhere where the truth is. And if you're asking me about the issue between Cornilescu and Fidela, I understand my opinion is probably irrelevant to most people, because if I speak Romanian, it sounds like a child. I can tell you the animals and it's not good. But it's not about that. It's about knowing this, having studied it through, having so many people who are professionals in this area talk to me about it, explain it, and having know what little bit I know, being able to find the difference between the Cornilescu and Fidela to see just what little bit I know that the Cornilescu is not right on a lot of things. If I got saved in a church that was teaching wrong, and I realized that, I come to that realization, I would move to a church that's teaching right. If I was using a Bible that was wrong on doctrine and was teaching things that were incorrect, even if I could twist it and make it right, it wouldn't matter. If it was wrong, I would move to a Bible that, as long as it's available. I mean, if you've got something better, why not move on, closer and closer as you can be to perfect?
What I have been told by people, the argument that they've used, they says, well, listen, you can still get to the same understanding. I said, what do you mean you can get to it? Well, by explaining this and that and knowing this, that. And I said, so in other words, you have to follow, a whole bunch of gymnastics to get to the same. It's just, why doesn't it just say what it's supposed to say? And the attachment people have, if somebody came to me and said, now listen, you've used the King James your whole life, but look at this wrong. Oh, really? Why? I mean, think about that. The people aren't going to get, excuse me, why? And you'd have to have some pretty solid evidence as to why. And that's why I tell people just to read the Fidela, put it next to the Cornilescu and just read it.
Yeah.
And the people that have said, well, it's funny, it sounds strange, this is, just read it. And after a while, they've read it. And one man came to me, he said, my son is reading the Bible. I can't get him to read Cornilescu because he doesn't know the words, but Fidela is the language he speaks. I said, well, honestly, that was what we were aiming for. So you see, the older people, I knew were not going to like the Latinization of the language that we did. Do we have some weird, strange phraseology? Yeah, we did. I understand that. And did we try and fix it? Yeah, we did. What was the reason for some of the quote unquote strange things? Is because our first point on our list was accuracy. And our second point was readability. Now, they're both very important, but accuracy trumps readability.
Yeah.
And so there are a few times where we just had to go ahead and say, listen, I just have to say it this way. We tried not to have too many of those, but it did come up more than we wanted it. We're at a point now where there are a few spelling errors. Like I said, there's an awful lot of the words in the Bible. The uhs and the ahs drive me up a wall. And there's a few things. So we have another, if anybody wants to know, people have asked, are you going to print anymore? No, I'm not. Not unless somebody gives me money. Everything's on an app right now. It's just I don't have the money to print. Everything goes out on MySword, then it goes out on eSword. But MySword is the final translation. It's an app. It's an Android app, and they're the ones who have the most updated one, because they anytime I will send an update, they just put it up immediately. So anything that's coming out now, we're done with editions. Anything that's coming up right now has to do with the grammar adjustment if it's necessary, because we said something wrong and we admitted it, or because there's a spelling error we missed, or punctuation. And again, did you know do you know the Fidela was read over 20 times by people I paid for punctuation, for grammar, for spelling, over 20 times read, and there's still mistakes in it. So it's hard, man.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you one final question, and it's one that I'll even give you a little bit of my perspective on it before I give the question. Is I know probably one of the biggest things I've heard as someone who's really kind of an outsider on the subject. I'm not a missionary in Romania. I'm just married to a Romanian, and I have Romanians in my church. One of the biggest things I've heard listening to missionaries in Romania talk, this kind of the holdback, is they don't even know how to bring this to their church because of what we've talked about, because of the fact that there's all these attachments, there's all these things, and it's easier. And for a lot of it's just not an issue at all. But for some, it's easier to paint. Okay, they're bad guys. We'll just ignore this.
No,
But no, I mean in terms of how they've treated towards the translation. It's easier for some to do that than it is to actually look at the issue and decide, should I move forward or not. Sometimes it's easier to ignore something than it is to actually consider it. But for me, what I want to ask is, what would you recommend to a pastor that he needs to do if he's going to try to teach this to his church, if he's going to make that move to lay the groundwork?
Okay, we did it in our church, okay, because we had people who just wouldn't give up the Cornilescu. And so what we did is we took, and this is what I think is important. Like I mentioned earlier, there are only two sources, okay? Bible has two places it comes from. You're either going to believe Origin from Alexandria, from Egypt, and if you know anything about Bibles, that man was a rank heretic, and Origin has an awful lot of evil stuff in the Catholic versions. And what you got to do is put them next to each other, okay? And if people know English, if they know Romanian, so what we did is we had 4 Romanian translations. Okay, we had the Yosh Bible, we had the Cornilescu, we had the GBV, I think it's called. We had the Fidela, and we read the Orthodox version. So we had the Orthodox, the Yosh, the GBV, the Fidela, and whatever I can remember. There are 5 of them. What we did, and then what we did is we had somebody reading the King James, which was then translated modo straight into Romanian. Okay, just to say, now listen, this is going to be funny, but understand this is just a straight up translation, and somebody who knew the language very well translated from English right into Romanian. And we had the people in the church reading them, and we said, okay, fine, what's the difference? Okay. And we chose the texts we knew were crazy, where we knew there were errors. We did this for 1 month on a Wednesday night. And what we did is we asked the people, they said, okay, I said, now, those of you who are still bringing Cornilescu, I said, do you see? And when we would have a problem with the Cornilescu, I said, do you see this? Do you see why this is a doctrinal problem here? Do you see that there's only 2 possibilities here? There's this one or there's that one. Okay, which one is right? And it came down to, I said, okay, fine. And then I know the other one we did. What we did is we read the Catholic, the Jesuit Bible, which is where, like Cornilescu, that's the Cornilescu root is the Jesuit Bible, and for the New Testament. And we said, now listen, this agrees to the Catholic right down the line here. This is the doctrine. This is the problem. Here's why. And then we taught on what the doctrinal error was. So we had people standing there in the church on a Wednesday night. We did this for a month solid. At the very end of it, we said, one guy said, I don't care. I'm keeping Cornilescu because I've had it my whole life. And I'm Cornilescu born, Cornilescu bred. And when I die, I'm Cornilescu dead. I mean, I'm not changing. I said, well, fine. That's your prerogative. But I want you to know why, and I want you to understand the issue. And for the most part, at that point, it was the end of the Cornilescu in the church. For the most part, nobody tried it anymore, but we had to prove it to them and we had to explain it to them. So we took a whole month and we just read the different translations and we said, okay, 2 lines, here they are. Are they the same? If they're not the same, why aren't they the same? And what does it actually say? If the Catholic version is right, then how does that affect all these other doctrines? And so you see, what we did is we showed why Catholic doctrine was wrong. We showed why the translation was wrong. We showed why that it is important that you have a Bible that understands the right thing, follows the doctrine correctly, because it follows through with the basis. And we tied everything into salvation, everything. And because the main issue was here in Romania, the main issues that are doctrinal errors, there's baptismal regeneration and there's Arminianism. Those are the 2 problems, the 2 big problems. You're saved because you're baptized, and then you have to keep it. And so you see, Cornilescu, the worst translation in the whole Bible is the book of Galatians. He absolutely butchers Galatians. And they do not understand Galatians correctly. And I think that's one of the main reasons why. So really, now that I was thinking, I hadn't really thought about that in a long time, but that is the verse. That's the Galatians was the reason we did the translation. I couldn't preach from it. And I couldn't teach salvation from Galatians. And so that is the main reason why. Now, if there's anybody who watches this and they love the Cornilescu, they're going to hate me even more. But the fact is again, I don't crusade against the Cornilescu because I don't have to, and it's not my job. It's not what I'm doing. I've gone back to focusing on our church with it, and I got a lot of miles on me from this, and aged me an awful lot. I told people, I said, if you really hate somebody, convince them to do a Bible translation, and because it's not for the faint of heart. But I wouldn't change it. Would I change what I did in a way? No. There's one thing I've learned. I mean, I'm almost 58. I'll be 58 in a couple days. And in my 58 years, I learned that I don't really, I can't second guess my decisions, because a lot of what I am today is based on the mistakes I made. You learn. Did we make mistakes with Fidela? Yeah, we did. Absolutely. I admit that. I never did not admit that. But one of the best things we did is we listened to our most harsh critics. And when they were right, we followed them. And, I do appreciate that you asked me about this. Do you realize, okay, this is 2023. We printed the first Fidela in 2011, the first full one. That was 12 years ago. You are the very first person in 12 years to ask me about the Fidela.
Okay.
The first person. I've never had anybody other than send me a letter telling me to leave the country, or telling me to stop, or telling me why I was wrong. I've never had anybody until you asked me any kind of question, allow me to talk about it. You're the first person in 12 years. So thank you for that.
Wow. I didn't realize that. That's, I appreciate you sharing that with us then. Yeah. Well, it's something that I hear a lot of talking about. Like you know some, so I won't get into names because a lot of the people I know there. You certainly know more people in Romania than me, but most all the ones that I know. And so I hear everybody's perspective, and that's why I wanted to do this. One is because I have people who I think if they'll listen to this will benefit from it in my church. But also because I have friends in Romania who I feel like if they just stop and listen to some of this, there wouldn't be much to discuss. It would be pretty straightforward on anything. And so that's why I appreciate you taking the time to share it with us. And for sure, the people in our church will take profit from it. Because actually, the reason why I build this as a Q&A on Bible translation is because what you've described is something that's beneficial to anybody who's working in that kind of ministry.
Yeah.
And also, and this is even my answer to the last question, as a pastor who's very strong on the King James and very strong King James only, I have to teach. I mean, the same way you had to lay a foundation for why do we need a Bible that's accurate, I have to do the same thing.
Right.
And I would encourage any pastor in Romania to understand, I have to, in my church, have a foundation that this is it. Like, I'm not going to go if somebody's using an NIV or something, I'm not going to take it out of their hand and throw it in the trash.
No.
It's theirs. They
No,
have
I
to give an
agree.
answer to their own master.
Right.
But I'm strong on this is the truth, and we have to have that standard, because when we get to a disagreement about what a verse says, exactly everything you described tonight, I have to be able to go to my Bible and say, no, the Bible says this. And if I have to twist it, like what you showed with Romans 10, if I have to twist it to make it say the truth, then that's not right.
No.
How can I say the Bible's the word of God if I have to twist it to make it say what's right?
Right.
And that would be my advice to any pastor who's trying to figure out, do I need to introduce this? Is it actually a big enough deal? How do I even start? The same way anybody else convinces their church to believe the Bible, is to show them. And I actually appreciate you bringing the history of that there's two Bibles. I don't know if you know Sam Gibb, but Sam Gibb's actually done a video with us before. That's one of his things he's really specialized in teaching on. But we've done studies just on that in the same exact format like this, talking about the history of the Bible. And so because every church needs to understand that. It doesn't matter whether you speak Romanian, whether it's Dutch, whether it's English. Every church has to understand the history of the Bible and how important it is to have the most accurate version of God's word you can have. And that's why I wanted this for Romanians, but also wanted this because it helps any other language to understand this problem as well.
Well, thank you very much. We love Romania. Romania is our home. We're going to retire here. And we love the people. We love everything about it. This is doing the Fidela. Well, again, I didn't want to, trust me. I did not want to. It was the people in our church that pushed it to us, and God raised the money. God brought the people together. But the final word is just that everybody understand the Fidela is a ministry of the Gospel Light Baptist Church. It was translated by the members of the Gospel Light Baptist Church, and I was just the director and the theologian, and I had the final say on words. I really did. I didn't choose vast majority. I chose a few of them, but for the most part, it's from our church, and so therefore, I will never call it my translation because it's not. And but I am appreciative that people have liked it, and I'm very also appreciative of the people who have brought things to us that we learn from. And I learned more about the Bible in the 12 years of translation than I did any other time. And I said over 22,000 hours of Bible study in that time period that I put in for the translation. And so I'm thankful for that because I learned so much. And so to me, it was a teacher for me. So I enjoyed
Sure,
that.
it would be. Yeah, for sure it would be. It's I really appreciate you sharing it. It helps me to have a greater understanding of the process because I've heard other people talk about it, but again, we've never got to talk about it directly. And so it actually encourages me even more about it, knowing the process and all that's went into it. I appreciate your spirit about it because we didn't get into it, but I mean, there's several people. Your son works with one of our friends, a mutual friend you and I have, who, as far as I understand, he uses the Cornilescu, and your son ministers with him. It's not like we're enemies of people. I have people
No,
sit
I'm
in my
not.
church who use it, but
No, I'm not an enemy with any of them. So no, absolutely not. I've never only like again, anytime I push it is when one of our members has an issue. That's the only time. We keep it in house, and we want to be friends with everybody. We really do that are believers. And but we stand firm on what we believe about the Fidela. I really do, and about the Bible, because like I said, God doesn't have different Bibles for different languages. He's got one word, and that's the underlying issue, accuracy. So, anyways, all
all
right.
right. Well, I appreciate it, brother. I appreciate you taking the time out to share this with us. Hopefully, this will be a help to anyone who comes across it. I always like to try to end with this. One is that if you have questions concerning, especially about salvation, but anything concerning Bible, concerning why we're King James or why Fidela or any of that kind of stuff, feel free to contact me or Brother Nibbe. Either one, we'll both be glad, I'm sure, to answer questions. Maybe don't write him any attacks.
Well, it's
But
okay. I have thick skin, trust me. But I was going to make a T-shirt of all the names I was called, and but I don't want to do that. So no, it's fine. It's fine. I got in a big discussion today about a Stephen Furtick online, and so it doesn't matter. People can say whatever they want to about me, so it's fine.
Well, I'll give you one last question then, and that is, do you have anything like anywhere where you put out your ministry stuff? online live stream messages, whatever you would like to mention.
Yeah, we do live stream right now just on Facebook. We're developing a new website. I have a philosophy on missions, and that missionaries change things. And if you're not going to change something, then go find something else to do. And what we're doing right now is we want to change the way websites are done. And it's following the principle of faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. Instead of asking people to go to a website and read, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put absolutely everything in a 92-second to a 2-minute long video format. Everything, absolutely everything, including the gospel. And we're in the process right now of writing the script and videoing. We haven't quite started the videoing yet of all of the gospel. And we're putting books online. We're putting answers, questions, hard questions, everything. And we're going, advertising is going to be done. See, we got to get on the little phones that are in front of people. That's where everybody's life is in front of them right now. And so right now, I don't have a website at the moment because it's under development. I was contacted yesterday by the programmer, and he wants to start over. And so it's just literally, I'm not curious. I am serious. He wants to start over. So I don't have any of this stuff, but Fidela will be there. Why we did it will be there, but it will be we're not going to ask anybody to read anything. It'll be on a green screen with a 3D person out front talking. It's going to be the cutting edge kind of stuff. And so we want to try and keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, technologically. We want people to listen to what we have to say. And so that's coming this year. We expect it all to go live this year. So yes, it's going to be in 5 or 6 different languages. But right now I wrote 38 scripts, 38 videos on the gospel that are 90 seconds to 2 minutes long each. So, nobody's going to sit down and watch a 90-minute thing there, but they'll watch here and there, and then you can keep clicking through and going through. So we're following the principle, faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. And so we want to do that with the technology evolved today. We're not just, okay, come to my website and read. Ain't nobody going to do it. They're not going to do it. And so this is the change we want to make. And then we're going to offer it all across the board, the concept on this. And so this is one of the things we want to change and want to do is we've got to get since COVID, you know what it's like. People don't talk to you. And I walked down the sidewalk and a man coming the other way and attracted my hand, and he was like, what do you want? Go away. It's just, so we're retooling. We have the same message, but we're doing our best to get everything right in the front of the people. So that's what's on our plates right now. And we have an awful lot of work going on. I'm writing a couple books that are also going in video format. And so we're trying to, anyways, in another year, I hope to have it all up. So anyways, that's what we're doing. So
you said you do have live streams. Where is that at?
It's on Facebook right now. It's on Facebook at the moment. It's under Biserica Baptista Lumina Evangeliae and on Facebook. And I put I'm only doing Sunday morning right now. I was doing Sunday school. I stopped doing Wednesday. I probably need to start doing Wednesday because people tell me that's the most interesting thing I have to say is on Wednesday, and it's not online. And but right now Facebook is the only. YouTube, we have a YouTube, and it's also a link to Facebook. So that's all we're doing right at the moment because the website was taken down and because it's being completely retooled. And
is there do you already have a domain for the website?
We have it's luminaevangelia.ro. Okay. That's what it is, but it's not up yet. And
this video will be around for a while. That's why I'm asking, because eventually it'll probably live long enough to help.
luminaevangelia.ro. So that's what it is. So dacă cineva vrea să vină să vadă, atunci o să avem videouri despre Evanghelia și despre alte lucruri de interes. Okay? So anyways, people go, see, that's my American Romanian there. So anyways.
All right. Well, again, we appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who's been part of the Bible study. Lori put the name in YouTube and the comments for anybody who needs it. If I could copy that real quick without, just put it on the screen. There we go. I'll put her comment up. So for anybody who needs it, there you go. Lori's put it into the comment for you. So you can look that up on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you need to find the live streams, and then also in the future for the website as well.
Sounds good.
So anybody wants to follow the ministry, you have that. And again, we thank you for your time, brother. We'll go ahead and close out the live stream.
All right. Thank you very much.